My beloved child, pause for a moment, because something about your soulmate has shifted today, and the strange part is that you may not have seen it happen. While you were going through your normal routine, while you were thinking they had moved on, while you were wondering why their energy felt distant, your soulmate reached a decision that they had been avoiding for much longer than you realize. It was not a random thought. It was not a passing emotion. It came after a moment that made them look at their life differently. And there is one detail connected to this moment that makes it even more unusual: 1111. Whether you notice that number today or not, the meaning behind this moment is about alignment, realization, and a choice that can no longer be ignored. Your soulmate has been carrying something inside that they have struggled to put into words. They replayed memories. They remembered conversations. They thought about the moments when they could have been more honest with you. And today, something finally clicked. They realized that pretending not to care was becoming harder than admitting how deeply they still feel. This is why you may have suddenly felt emotional, distracted, peaceful, or unusually thoughtful without understanding why. Something changed in the connection before you ever received proof of it. And the most surprising part is that their decision was not about finding someone new. It was about finally facing what they already know about you. For a long time, your soulmate has been standing between two versions of themselves. One version wanted to protect their pride, remain silent, and act as though everything was perfectly under control. The other version kept whispering the truth they did not want to confront: you still care. Today, that second voice became impossible to ignore. They may have looked at your old conversation, your picture, your name, or even something completely ordinary that suddenly reminded them of you. And instead of pushing the feeling away like they normally would, they stayed with it. They asked themselves a question that changed the entire emotional atmosphere: what if I am making the biggest mistake by staying silent? That question stayed with them. It followed them through the day. It made them remember the tenderness, the laughter, the misunderstandings, and even the moments when neither of you knew what to say. They began realizing that some connections do not disappear simply because two people stop talking. Sometimes silence only hides what is still alive underneath. And this is where their unexpected decision begins. They decided that they no longer want the story between you to remain unfinished. They may not know exactly how everything will unfold, but they know one thing with unusual clarity: they cannot keep pretending that you mean nothing to them. Something inside them has become softer, more honest, and more willing to acknowledge what they once tried to suppress. But listen carefully, because there is another layer to what happened today. Your soulmate did not simply think about you and move on. They started questioning a choice they made in the past. They wondered whether they walked away too quickly, whether they misunderstood your heart, whether they allowed fear or pride to influence something that deserved patience. And the deeper they went into those memories, the more they realized that the connection affected them differently than they admitted. There was a moment today when they became unusually quiet, even if nobody around them understood why. They were mentally somewhere else. They were thinking about you. They were imagining what it would feel like to hear your voice again. They wondered whether you would still recognize the person behind all the distance. And then came the decision: instead of waiting endlessly for circumstances to change, they would begin changing their own approach. This does not mean everything happens instantly. It means the internal resistance has started to break. The person who once said, "Maybe it is better this way," is now asking, "But what if it was never supposed to end this way?" That is a completely different question. And once someone begins asking that question sincerely, their actions often begin to follow. Something is moving beneath the surface, and you may soon notice it through a small sign, a change in communication, an unexpected memory, or a gesture that seems simple but carries far more meaning than you expected. And here is the part one want you to remember as this message continues: the biggest revelation has not happened yet. What your soulmate decided today is only the beginning of what they have been preparing themselves to admit. There is something they have wanted to tell you, but they kept postponing it because they were afraid of how you might respond. They imagined different possibilities. They wondered whether you had forgotten them. They wondered whether your heart had already chosen a different direction. They even wondered if reaching out would make them vulnerable. But today, those questions began losing their power. At 11:11, think of the moment as a symbol of two paths meeting at the same point, what they wanted to say and what they were afraid to say. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that avoiding a feeling does not make the feeling disappear. And that realization has created a completely different energy around this connection. Something they once considered impossible now feels worth exploring. Something they once dismissed as too late suddenly feels unfinished. And there is a reason this message found you at this exact moment. The next part of this story is connected to the specific realization that made your soulmate change their mind today, and once you understand what they finally discovered about your connection, you will understand why their decision was so unexpected. There is something your soulmate finally understood today that they could not understand before, and this realization is the reason their entire attitude toward this connection has begun to change. They started looking beyond the surface. Instead of remembering only the difficult moments, they remembered the moments when your presence made them feel understood without needing to explain themselves. They remembered the way you noticed little things. They remembered conversations they once considered ordinary but now realize were deeply meaningful. And suddenly, they understood something that surprised even them: they were not missing a moment, they were missing you. That distinction hit them hard emotionally. They realized that replacing memories with distractions never actually replaced the person connected to those memories. They could continue their routine, talk to other people, stay busy, and convince themselves they were fine, but somewhere underneath all of that, your name still carried a feeling they could not easily explain. Today, instead of running from that feeling, they allowed themselves to acknowledge it. And that is why their decision became so unexpected. They decided they would stop letting assumptions speak for their heart. They decided they would no longer automatically believe that you had forgotten them. They began considering the possibility that you might still have questions too. And once that possibility entered their mind, they started thinking about what they would say if they finally had the courage to speak honestly. Then something even deeper happened. Your soulmate began imagining the future differently. Before today, they may have pictured a future where the two of you simply remained a memory from another chapter. But today, that picture became difficult for them to accept. They imagined seeing you again. They imagined sitting across from you and having the conversation that was never completed. They imagined telling you the things they kept inside because they did not know how to express them at the time. They imagined what it would feel like if both of you could finally put down the misunderstandings and simply speak from the heart. And the more they imagined it, the more they realized they did not want to lose the possibility completely. This is important because your soulmate's decision is not coming from a sudden impulse. It is coming from emotional clarity. They have started understanding what your connection meant to them after experiencing distance from it. Sometimes people only recognize the weight of a bond when they no longer have constant access to it. Your soulmate has been learning that lesson quietly. They may have appeared calm from the outside, but internally, they have been comparing what they feel now with what they felt when you were closer. And today, the comparison became impossible to ignore. They realized that something about you was different. Not perfect. Not without challenges. But different. You reached a part of them that very few people ever reached. That realization is exactly why they are reconsidering a decision they once believed was final. And now we reach the moment connected to 1111, because there is a reason this number carries such emotional symbolism in this message. Imagine two separate paths suddenly appearing to point toward the same place. That is what this connection represents right now. Your soulmate has been moving through their own lessons while you have been moving through yours, but today they began seeing how certain experiences, they are becoming willing to approach the connection differently. And if you have recently felt that something was shifting, do not immediately dismiss that feeling. Sometimes the first sign of change is not an obvious message or dramatic gesture. Sometimes it is simply a change in someone's willingness to confront their own emotions. Your soulmate is reaching that stage now. They are no longer only asking what they want. They are asking what they are willing to do differently to protect something meaningful. But there is still one thing they have not fully revealed, and this is where the story becomes even more emotional. Your soulmate has been holding on to a specific thought about you, a thought they have never completely admitted. They wonder whether you would still recognize their heart if they showed you the truth behind their silence. They wonder whether you would believe them if they explained why certain things happened the way they did. And most importantly, they wonder whether there is still a small opening between you where honesty could enter. Today, instead of closing that door inside themselves, they decided to leave it open. That may sound simple, but emotionally, it is a massive change. Because the person who once tried to convince themselves that the connection was over is now allowing themselves to imagine another chapter. They are not asking the universe for a perfect story. They are asking whether two people who genuinely affected each other can finally understand what they were unable to understand before. And the next revelation is connected to the exact thought that crossed their mind when they made this decision today. It is something about you that they suddenly realized they had completely underestimated, and once that realization settled into their heart, they knew they could no longer look at your connection the same way. Something happened inside your soulmate when they finally stopped looking at your connection through the eyes of the past and started looking at it through the eyes of everything they have learned since then. They suddenly understood that the person they remember is not the same person they are thinking about today. They began wondering how much you have changed, how much you have grown, and whether you have become stronger because of everything you experienced together. That thought created a strange mixture of admiration and regret inside them. They realized they may have underestimated your emotional strength. They may have assumed you would always remain available emotionally, waiting for them to figure things out, but today they questioned that assumption. They wondered, what if they have finally learned to live without me? That question stayed with them because, for the first time, they understood that your silence does not necessarily mean you stopped caring. It may mean you stopped chasing answers. And that realization changed the way they see you. They started appreciating the quiet strength they once overlooked. They remembered moments when you gave more understanding than you received, moments when you tried to keep the connection alive even when communication became difficult. Suddenly, those memories did not feel ordinary anymore. They felt valuable. And this is where your soulmate's unexpected decision became stronger. They decided that if they ever approach you again, they do not want to repeat the same emotional patterns. They do not want to return with vague words or half-hearted explanations. They want to be more honest about what they actually feel. There is another thought they had today that may explain why this shift feels so powerful. Your soulmate began imagining what their life would look like if they completely accepted that you were no longer part of it. Instead of feeling relief, they felt a strange emptiness. They realized that moving forward is not always the same as moving on. They could continue meeting people, building their routine, laughing, working, traveling, and living their life, yet there would still be a particular memory of you that remained untouched. They finally understood that the connection did not matter only because of romance. It mattered because of the emotional imprint you left behind. You made them question themselves. You made them feel seen. You brought out emotions they were not always prepared to handle. And today, they recognized that those experiences changed them. That is why their decision is not simply about contacting you. It is about becoming emotionally honest with themselves first. They are beginning to accept that you were not just another chapter they could casually close. You became part of their personal story. And when someone reaches that realization, they can no longer pretend that the past had no meaning. This is why 11:11 feels so significant in the message. It represents the moment of recognition, the instant when two separate emotional realities suddenly appear connected. Why? Your soulmate is recognizing something they once refused to see. Whatever happened between you, it mattered more than they allowed themselves to admit. Now listen closely, because this is where the emotional tension rises. Your soulmate has been thinking about one particular conversation with you, and they keep replaying it differently in their mind. They remember what was said, what was left unsaid, and most importantly, what they wish they had said instead. There is a sentence they wish they could take back, another sentence they wish they had spoken, and a moment where they believe they could have handled everything differently. They have mentally rewritten that moment many times. But today, they stopped rewriting the past and started thinking about the future. That is the difference. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" they began asking, "What can I do differently now?" That question represents emotional growth. It means they are moving away from blame and toward responsibility. They are beginning to understand that love cannot survive on feelings alone. It needs honesty, communication, consistency, and courage. Your soulmate may have once believed that strong emotions were enough to keep a connection alive. Today they are realizing that meaningful connections require action as well. And that is why the decision they made today carries so much weight. They have decided to stop allowing fear of an uncomfortable conversation to control their choices. They may still feel nervous. They may still hesitate. But hesitation is no longer stronger than the desire to finally be honest. And there is one final layer to this part that you need to hold on to. because the next stage of this story is about what your soulmate is actually preparing to do with this realization. They are no longer simply thinking about you from a distance. They are thinking about how they could make their feelings understandable without overwhelming you. They are considering the simplest way to open communication again, because they know that a dramatic entrance would not fix what needs genuine understanding. They want their actions to mean something. They want you to see the difference between who they were and who they are becoming. And somewhere inside them, there is a quiet hope that if the opportunity comes, you will not judge them only by their past. They know they cannot erase what happened. They cannot change yesterday. But they believe they can choose differently today. That is the unexpected shift. And the most powerful part is still ahead, because your soulmate has reached a point where one specific memory, one specific realization, and one specific question are pushing them toward a decision they have postponed for far too long. The moment they finally answer that question, the entire emotional direction of this connection becomes clearer, and that is exactly where the next chapter begins. The moment your soulmate finally answered that question within themselves, something became clear that they could no longer unsee. They realized they were not simply missing the past, they were missing the possibility of building something more honest with you. That realization changed the meaning of everything they had been feeling. Instead of asking whether they should forget you, they began asking whether they should finally stop pretending they had forgotten. Instead of wondering whether the connection was finished, they started wondering whether it had simply reached a point where both people needed to grow before understanding it properly. And today, they made an unexpected decision. They would no longer allow pride, uncertainty, or old assumptions to make the decision for them. They want to know the truth. They want to know where your heart stands. They want to understand whether the connection still has a place in your life. This does not mean everything suddenly becomes perfect. It means they are finally willing to approach the situation with honesty rather than avoidance. That is a powerful difference. Your soulmate has been thinking about how to communicate without pretending, without exaggerating, and without hiding behind casual words. They want their next meaningful interaction with you to carry intention. Somewhere inside them, they are preparing themselves to say something they have been holding back for a long time. And the reason this matters so much is because they now understand that silence may protect someone temporarily, but honesty is what creates clarity. There is also something they want you to understand about their distance. They are beginning to recognize that their silence may have communicated something completely different from what they actually felt. You may have believed they did not care, while internally they were struggling to understand themselves. You may have interpreted their absence as indifference, while they were actually trying to figure out why the connection continued to affect them. Today, they realized how easily silence can create misunderstandings. That thought made them look back at everything differently. They began wondering how many times you may have needed reassurance but received distance instead. How many times you may have wanted an honest answer but received uncertainty. And for the first time, they are taking responsibility for their side of the story. This is one of the strongest signs of emotional maturity in this entire message. They are no longer only thinking about what you did or what happened to them. They are thinking about what they could have done better. They are recognizing their own role. And that realization is what makes their unexpected decision meaningful. They are not simply returning emotionally because they feel nostalgic. They are considering whether they can approach you with greater honesty and consistency than before. They want to replace confusion with clarity. They want to replace assumptions with communication. And they want to discover whether the two of you can finally understand what you could not understand when emotions were running high. Then comes the 11:11 moment, the symbolic turning point that brings everything together. Your soulmate may have looked at the clock, noticed a familiar number, remembered you unexpectedly, or simply experienced one of those moments when everything seemed to become quiet for a second. And in that silence, they realized something simple but powerful: they still have a choice. They can continue pretending nothing happened, or they can acknowledge what this connection taught them. They can keep waiting for the perfect moment, or they can become courageous enough to create a meaningful moment through honest communication. They can continue carrying unanswered questions, or they can finally seek clarity. That realization does not guarantee a specific outcome, but it explains why their emotional direction has changed. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that love is not only about being together. It is also about having the courage to tell the truth when the truth matters. And today, they became more willing to do exactly that. The unexpected decision was not simply about you. It was about the person they want to become when they think about you. They want to be more mature, more transparent, more intentional. They want to stop repeating the same patterns. And if they do take a step toward you, it will be because something inside them has genuinely changed, not because they suddenly forgot everything that happened, but because they finally understood its meaning. So if this message feels strangely personal, take a moment and remember the central revelation: your soulmate is no longer viewing this connection as something they can simply dismiss. They are looking at it with a different level of awareness. The memories that once confused them are now teaching them. The silence that once felt comfortable is now making them question what they truly want. And the decision they made today has opened a door they previously kept closed. What happens next will depend on real choices, honest communication, and the willingness of both hearts to meet each other with maturity. But one thing has already changed: your soulmate's perspective. They are no longer asking whether you mattered. They are asking what they should do about the fact that you still do. And that question has become impossible for them to ignore. The story does not end with today's decision. In many ways, today's decision is where the real story begins, because now your soulmate has to face the one thing they have been avoiding all along: telling you what they truly feel.